We got a packed feminist Buzzkills pod this week. A federal court upheld a West Virginia medication abortion ban, which could have national repercussions. We'll break it down and what it could mean for access in all 50 states.
And ever wonder how the escalation of anti-trans legislation came so hard and so fast? ACLU lawyer and activist Chase Strangio drills down on that and tells us about Heightened Scrutiny, a soon-to-be-released documentary about how he made history as the first trans attorney to argue before the Supreme Court.
Plus, RuPaul's Drag Race icon, actress, advocate, and superstar Peppermint is here to talk activism, acting, and celebrating trans joy in this ever-awful world.
All that and as much abortion news as we can cram into an hour coming up on this episode of the Feminist Buzzkills podcast, the show that would never hog stage time from the FIFA Cup champions.
Never, never. I'm Liz Winstead, and that was my co-host Moji Oluwadale.
That's all coming up, and I'm excited that we are living up to a promise, Liz.
Same here. So, if you're a regular listener of the pod, last week, Moji and I had raised a big question with regards to the SCOTUS birthright citizens ruling and how it could affect abortion rulings.
Liz and I put our amateur lawyer hats on, outraged that it seemed like the recent SCOTUS decision that lower court rulings could not be carried out nationwide, but rather only bring relief to the plaintiffs who brought the case, doesn't seem to count on abortion rulings, which seem to still affect the whole nation.
It seems wholly unfair. And as we promised, since we had Chase Strangio coming up as a guest today, and he's a lawyer who argued before the Supreme Court, that we were going to actually not just suppose and ponder whether or not this is gaslighting, but if it's actually something we should be concerned about. So we asked Chase, and here's what he had to say. Can you explain this? In the case that wasn't really about birthright citizenship, that was more about like the people who filed the case get the relief, why is it then that Matthew Kacsmaryk can have a ruling about abortion that affects everybody in the country? How come that's not like, no, that can't be because of this thing?
Well, so that's the real question is like, are they going to apply this principally? You know, the question is it really like a modern thing, or has there always been nationwide injunctions and that's why they were going back and forth about it? And the reality is, for lots of different reasons, the nationwide injunction as a remedial tool has exploded. And one of the main reasons for that is the Northern District of Texas and the strategic filing by the right before Kacsmaryk and O'Connor in these districts where they know they're going to get those judges. And then the judges enjoin, you know, the Biden and Obama policies nationwide. And of course, then it was the same with student loans. And there was a moment when the Solicitor General's office under Biden went to the Supreme Court and says, look, maybe you want to do something about these nationwide injunctions. And of course, then they were like, no, not now. Now they're coming in and saying no nationwide injunctions. So the real question is that going to be applied? Absolutely. It should mean that Kacsmaryk can no longer do the broad relief. And that was sort of coming up in the mifepristone case, because at the argument, you could tell that part of the reason, in addition to the fact that they had no standing, was they were like, you're trying to block this rule for everyone, and you're just like this random doctor here. So that was like the meat of the Miffy decision. The real question is, how is this going to go in the lower courts? Are they going to be principled? They're not usually, and they're getting less and less principled. It's like, and that's what Jackson is really doing, is sort of calling that out. So corporations can do what they want, but individual litigants can't. And she started to name that very explicitly. I think this remedy question is going to be a huge test. And the fact that they did it in this case was insane, because there was just so many reasons why this wasn't the case to do it in. And it's alarming. But on the upside, it should mean that every bad case can only apply to the people that sued also.
Thank you. I know I was ranting like a dime store moron who's never taken a law class, but like was trying to figure it out last week on the podcast. And I was like, I have to ask Chase because I need to figure out for my own brain. I felt gaslit.
Yeah, you are being
I think
gaslit
that's what the Supreme Court does.
Yeah. I was like, you are definitely being gaslit by this court. To me, yeah.
Shocked that the Supreme Court is gaslighting you, because that's literally what they've been doing.
I just discovered it now. I thought they had my best interest at heart the whole time. I feel very disappointed.
If only you had a private jet or a yacht to offer up.
I gave my private jet and my yacht to the Bezos wedding party.
I bet you if you had a Nazi sculpture garden, that would help.
Are you implying I don't?
So many things to learn about you, Liz.
So little time. Chase, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you both. Great to see you.
Vindicated. We should lean more into our trust but verify analysis.
Yes. I totally agree. I have to say that I thought about this all week and I was so mad about it. So it feels really good to know that our rage is actually based on real concerns and not just conspiracy theories we're cooking up into our heads.
I mean, the conspiracy theories are coming fast and hard, so we can't be blamed. But we also have so much more brilliance coming up from Chase later on the pod. But first, let's get to the steaming dump of this week's abortion news.
Indeed. Hat tip to Jessica Valenti for literally wading into the sewer for this story. House Republicans have introduced the Respectful Treatment of Unborn Remains Act, a federal law that would punish abortion providers who flush fetal remains in publicly owned water systems with a 5-year prison sentence.
If this smells fishy, it's because this bill, in search of a problem, could very well be used as a backdoor way to jail for anyone who, for any reason, passes their pregnancy on a toilet.
FBK's extensive research has found that 0% of abortions performed at clinics are flushed down a toilet, but 100% of people who are the Secretary of Health and Human Services swim in a river of shit with their grandkids.
Gross! And for the second time this year, a court clerk in New York refused to docket Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's sketchy order for summary judgment against Dr. Margaret Carpenter, who legally provided abortion medication to a patient in Texas.
Dr. Carpenter is protected from prosecution by laws that shield New York doctors when they prescribe abortion drugs from New York, a state where abortion is legal, to a state anywhere abortion is banned.
No word on whether the state of New York is countersuing Paxton on biblical grounds.
Oh, you know his wife is making sure of that. They do everything on biblical grounds, all the things, every day. Doesn't matter. I don't even know what biblical grounds are. It sounds like a bad coffee shop. Anyway, finally, attention Walmart shoppers. As of July 1st in Virginia, if you use the Walmart website to buy pregnancy tests, condoms, or other reproductive and sexual health products, you will get a pop-up that says you have to give consent to Walmart to collect your data.
If you don't, they suggest you make your whorish purchases elsewhere. It's all part of a misinterpretation of a new law that's supposed to protect data privacy, but surprise, surprise, MAGA megadonor Walmart has found a way to exploit it to further put our information at risk.
Shocking that a big GOP donor would support more privacy for the Epstein list than your shopping list. And that, my friends, was your steaming news dump.
Whew.
I know, it was a lot.
It's a lot, and there's more shit we're getting into. But before we get to the meat of that, we have some business to take care of.
Tonight, if you are night birds, night owls, I am going to be on the 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC. Simone Sanders Townsend is filling in as host, so I'm going to be there. It airs at 11 p.m. Friday night, July 18th, Eastern Time. So set your whatever you set to remind yourself to watch Liz on Stephanie Ruhle on Friday night at 11 in the summer.
It's worth it. And we are going to hit you hard with this from now until August. But folks, AAF is doing a brand new Operation Save Abortion event that will also be live streamed from Netroots Nation Saturday, August 9th, 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Central Time. You can go to aafront.org/opsave-netroots to register.
Oh my God, this OpSafe training is so lovely because it's not just a bunch of people in a webinar in your face. We are in this beautiful stage, sitting in chairs, and it's very personal. And if you've never seen an OpSafe training or attended an OpSafe training, it's an incredible interactive activist workshop and conversation that's hosted by Moji and I and our programs team at AAF. We're going to be talking about and teaching you about how you can execute 3 different action items, one that supports abortion patients and providers, one that helps expose fake clinics, and one that helps you take direct action to the politicians who are passing these laws.
You will be able to ask questions in real time and walk away with new ideas to get involved and have detailed toolkits to execute them all. So gather friends, to watch the stream at home, as we always like to create programs that are the most rewarding with your activist besties.
And you know what I love most, Moji? I love that we keep creating opportunities so that you can use your heart and your hands to directly help out people. So often you feel like, what can I do until the election? Well, these are things you can do to make people feel better as they're navigating all of this garbage. So not only can you stream it, I have an even better idea. You know what that is? Join us at Netroots Nation, August 7th through 9th. It's in New Orleans. What fun to be with your activist besties in New Orleans. Come on now. Now, if you don't know about Netroots, it is my favorite thing. It is like the Comic-Con of progressive politics. It's amazing politicians and activists and nonprofits, and there's workshops and trainings and discussions, all that keep you up to date on what's happening in our world with all kinds of ways you can plug into community and be the change that you want to see in the world.
So 2025 marks the 20th year of Netroots Nation. So come join your Buzzkills for our live workshop and a weekend of like-minded folks giving us all kinds of information and tools to fight back. You can go to netrootsnation.org for the specifics, how to buy a ticket, where to stay, the full agenda, featured speakers, all of that you need to make it worth your while.
And there is a Buzzkills discount.
Even more worth your while.
It's more worth your while. This is not a fake commercial. This is real. I always have to say that. But if you want to just go to netrootsnation.org, enter the promo code Buzzkills when you go to checkout and get 10% off of the price of your ticket. They also have on their website discounted hotel blocks too. So again, netrootsnation.org, register, and let us know you're coming.
We would love to see you.
So now let's get to the stories we wanted to break down further.
First, we have a quick update on a story that we have been following at FBK. So in 2022, your Buzzkills interviewed Lisa Sobel, a Kentucky woman who, along with two other plaintiffs, sued the state, claiming that the Kentucky abortion ban violated their Jewish faith.
Yep. Now, through the process, a Kentucky judge threw out the case in June of 2024. But this week, a court of appeals ruled that while Lisa and another plaintiff did not have standing, their third plaintiff, a woman named Jessica Kalb, does have standing. Now, this is the weird part. They ruled that Jessica has standing solely because she has 9 frozen embryos and is unwilling to transfer them until she understands the implications of this ban.
So these other women basically don't have standing because they don't have eggs outside of their body. They do have uteruses, but for some reason, having fertilized eggs, I don't know, makes you have more standing. That's crazy. And it also means possibly that only pregnant people or people with eggs on ice can challenge abortion bans in that state.
Sometimes I have to be honest, I don't quite understand IVF. I know you harvest your own eggs.
Yeah.
And then do you freeze those and then fertilize them when you want to get them fertilized? Or do you then fertilize them and then freeze them? Is it both?
I feel like it's both or either. And you know what? We've had IVF doctors here before, and those were not the questions we asked.
But I mean, the reason I ask Emoji is because, like, if you just have eggs in your body, you don't have rights. But if you have eggs in a vat, you have standing?
That is what I don't understand. It almost seems like if you have the capacity for pregnancy at all, right? If you have uterus and some eggs, you should have standing to challenge an abortion ban that doesn't allow you to have evidence-based medical care.
It's the very definition of like having tissue in the game. Literally.
Also, like, if you have to have eggs on ice or like be actively pregnant, like, okay, let's say you discover you're pregnant at 6 weeks, right? And then you're at New York and you can have an abortion up to 24 weeks. That's not a lot of time for a court case to wind through a system and you get the abortion care you needed. It's almost like, Liz, I'm just going to posit this, they designed it so no one could challenge it.
Yes. And, now that we've been newly emboldened by Chase that our hot takes are valid, we should just have a million of them. And I think something that people don't know is Kentucky courts have previously ruled that abortion providers also don't have standing to sue on behalf of their patients. So who can sue at all?
Literally just Jessica Kalb.
Just Jessica Kalb and Jessica Kalb alone. But like this has been the whole thing is we have followed some Supreme Court cases like the June medical case. Alito has reared its ugly head a lot about standing and who has standing. And truth be told, he hates that abortion providers have standing and he doesn't think they should. But like when you think about the fact that like Jessica Kalb And maybe if somebody was pregnant, they would have standing. But like, let's be honest. If you're a pregnant person and the only way that you can sue about abortion bans is when you're pregnant, if you're trying to access abortion, boy, that limits your window.
You have no time. You have no time. You have no time to access abortion. And then let's say you do carry pregnancy to term, have a baby. The minute you are not pregnant, do you just lose capacity for standing?
I mean, if you do, then that says what we have been harping on constantly, which is say it with me. If you have a uterus, you are simply a vessel.
You are simply a vessel. And it seems like the fertilized eggs are your key to a right? That's crazy.
I mean, it is crazy. I mean, so here's the thing. We're really excited that Jessica and only Jessica is allowed to move forward. Now they're going to see if the case has merits. That's the next steps. But we'll keep you posted because look, we are here, man, for flipping the script on religious liberty to serve our emancipation.
That's exactly right. And again, I realize we didn't define standing beforehand, but standing is just the right to bring a case.
Yeah.
So as Liz said, they haven't even talked about if she has a real case. Just does she have a right to bring a case? It's bonkers. Anyway.
And her frozen eggs give her a right. I got some shit in my freezer. I don't know what it is, but I wonder if it gives me a right to do anything. It's so crazy.
So we're going to be following this and we'll let you know. And again, this isn't a win. This is just sort of like a half step in the direction of possible liberty. We'll see. Liz, let's move on to the huge story this week. Will you walk us into it?
Now, this is a story that was a 5-alarm abortion fire that was set this week in federal court. And again, the media is absent from covering it. So what happened was the Fourth Circuit Court of West Virginia has upheld West Virginia's near total abortion ban. And there is a section of this law that could go far beyond West Virginia and really affect us all. So the ban is, it's basically a total abortion ban. It bans all abortions. They have rape exceptions, but only 8 weeks if you're an adult or 14 weeks if you're a minor, and your rape must be reported to law enforcement. And they also have, some exceptions to save the life of the pregnant person, but we all know how that goes, those exceptions.
Those exceptions leave people bleeding in parking lots trying to get care. So that does not help. And this isn't a law, but this is happening in the backdrop of a West Virginia prosecutor saying, hey, people who have the capacity for pregnancy, if you have a miscarriage, remember to report it to law enforcement, which is bonkers. So basically, if you're bleeding from a miscarriage, they want you to report your miscarriage or you might be subject to prosecution for your miscarriage. And
so this is how they want you to navigate their vague, terrible abortion bans. In fact, the prosecutor actually said, call law enforcement or 911 and just say, I miscarried. I want you to know.
I remember seeing on the socials some of the jokes about this, and people were like, I guess I'll just call them after every period, because who knows?
Because who knows? You might as well just put yourself under house arrest.
Basically. So Liz, let's get to specifically what is happening in this ban that was upheld and what the ruling in the Fourth Circuit was.
So the thing that's got us really worried about how this could have national implications is that a part of the law that was upheld that's unprecedented is that the court ruled for the first time ever that a state could ban a drug that has been approved by the FDA for nationwide use. The drug we're talking about is mifepristone, one of the FDA-approved drugs in medication abortion. And that holds a whole host of problems for a number of reasons. I mean, in some ways, it's basically green lighting the state to be political in how it regulates medication. And Moji, that can open up a whole bunch of shit.
Last year, around this time, we reported on the Chevron doctrine, which was a SCOTUS decision that happened at the end of their term in 2024. And that was one that essentially dismantled the rules that had been in place that were essentially, if a government agency is tasked with regulating a thing like the FDA is tasked with regulating medication, then if it goes to the court for some disagreement about how it's used, judges should defer to the regulatory agency because they have the experts. But dismantling the Chevron doctrine actually said judges who don't have expertise can just make their decisions on this.
So basically, no, you don't have to worry about facts anymore. It's just judges can have feelings, and that's what happens.
So that's really, really disturbing. And the crazy thing is the anti-abortion side is basically saying, well, the FDA has never been authorized to regulate the practice of medicine. That falls to the states to handle. But when did legislators been authorized to regulate the practice of medicine. That's why we have licensures for medical doctors. I don't understand.
It is the most fucked up thing. And so really the biggest question in all of this that feels scary, this is all sort of tied together. But if this stands and if it doesn't go challenged, this piece of the law, then can a state regulate a multi-use drug like mifepristone if you use it for something else if one of the uses is banned in that state, or if they just don't like one of the things the drug could be used for? Can they just say, well, we're not going to have this drug because I know it'll help cure your cancer, but also it could be used as miscarriage management, and you might use that nefariously, so you have to find a different cancer drug, one that might not be as effective for you.
So you asked that as a question, but it turns out, yes, Liz, we are at that place, right? We are at a place that drugs can be banned for a certain class of people for certain reasons, but be allowed for other people for different reasons. And that can, if we play it out, that can look like states deciding contraception can be used by married people with their husband's permission, but not by single people. And there was a SCOTUS case that decided that.
It's perfect to have our guest on today because as we're looking at these trans bans that are happening all over the country, this was the case that went to the Supreme Court. The very notion that there are gender-affirming care drugs that states say, if you are happy with the gender you are assigned at birth and you want to use a hormone that matches to that, that's fine. But if you were not and you want to use a hormone that helps you affirm the gender that you are, it's not okay. And we went to the Supreme Court with it. And guess who's our guest? The lawyer that argued that case before the courts. What? It's true.
Yes. Oh my God. And he's so amazing.
Oh my God.
He is the co-director of the ACLU LGBT and HIV project. He recently made history as the first trans person to argue before the Supreme Court and is the subject of the upcoming documentary, Heightened Scrutiny, that follows him on that journey. I'm so excited to welcome Chase Strangio.
Hey, Chase.
Hi, Chase.
Hey, how's it going? I mean, I don't even know how to answer that anymore.
That's a tricky question in 2025.
I wanted to start with a hard one as a guest.
Yeah. I'm breathing in and out, and I'm out of bed. Those are two good things. I'm upright, breathing in and out. So I feel like we're winning. We have just followed your incredible trajectory and advocacy for a really long time. And we were just so excited to be able to talk to you just after the SCOTUS case and then the documentary. And one thing that we are just so profoundly obsessed with educating our audience about is what these intersections of abortion advocacy, abortion activism, abortion healthcare, the intersections between that and trans care, because so many folks are just like, I don't understand why they're the same. The whole, you're losing the word woman, people. It's just, we can't.
I really will do whatever it takes in my lifetime to help people understand how these government attacks, these private attacks on our bodies are connected, and how there are very strategic resources being deployed to make us fight each other. And if we continue down that path, I think we're all going to be a lot worse off.
And the fighting each other is a key point, but also even without the fighting each other, which is a fun, nasty twist, but literally the playbook that is being used to erase or minimize trans rights are the exact same tactics that were used to fight abortion and win in the fight against abortion. They're having these narratives around regret. They're having all these fake scientists that are basically like people pointing the finger to themselves and each other, trying to prosecute people who leave whatever states are oppressive, and also really taking minors and making minor care the front line of attack on rights that are ultimately an attack on everybody's rights.
Yeah, it's remarkable how you can map the playbooks directly onto each other. And Erin Carmon has this incredible piece, and it starts with this narrative about a whistleblower at a clinic and the idea of regret and the care being provided to lax. And you think it's a story about a quote unquote whistleblower in the gender affirming medical care context. And it's actually a story about an abortion provider. And the narrative, it evokes that sense sense in that moment that you think you know the story because it's about gender affirming care, but it's actually the exact same story that took place a decade prior with respect to abortion. And, the reader doesn't know because they're identical. And you can just take out the specifics and they're the same narrative that is being deployed very strategically and very successfully.
When we look at the ways that we have been demonized, and you talk about it in the documentary a little bit, because we're just new to talking about abortion and people are new to seeing and understanding trans people, right? Like this is like a 15-year where it's been, and I'm going to air quote this, safe for trans folks to come out and be, right? But when you talked about in the documentary, and it hit me really hard, when they use the language of grooming and the same with us, baby killer, and I'm sure you've seen these people because I've literally had anti-abortion people look into my eyes, look right through me and not see me. And the permission they give themselves to create harm, like there's a justification piece there that I think regular folks who are supportive even and don't even understand how incredibly scary that narrative is and how it's permeating.
Yeah, I mean, and the parallels are so stark because I can think about how the majority of people who have abortions are already mothers, are already parents, and many trans people who are being called groomers are parents. I'm a parent. I don't want to be cast in the public discourse as a groomer of children. I am not a threat to children. My existence does not pose a threat to children, and someone taking control of their body is not murdering babies. These sort of very extreme and insidious narratives about people do become really dangerous because there are people who internalize them and look at us as dangerous people for just existing, just advocating for ourselves, just advocating for our communities. And I think we need to expose the nature of the harm because it also can be very chilling of advocacy because people become fearful that if they speak out, they will put themselves and their family members and their community in danger.
I love that you brought up the chilling part. I also want us to get directly to the Scrimetti case because I think that this is really important. So you made history being the first openly transgender attorney to argue before SCOTUS. So applause. Applause for our listeners who have maybe not followed the case. Can you explain what it is about and also what the outcome is of the case? Because we got the decision a few weeks ago.
United States versus Scrimetti is a challenge to a Tennessee law that categorically bans medical care for transgender adolescents only, overriding the aligned decision of adolescents, their parents, and their doctors. So the government is displacing the decisions that parents, doctors, and adolescents have made together. Tennessee passes this law in 2023. And I think what's really important is to trace this trajectory of these laws. In 2020, 0 states banned this medical care for trans adolescents. In 2024, half the country banned this care for transgender adolescents. When were the majority of those laws passed? 2023. What happened in 2022? The Supreme Court decided Dobbs, and that changed the landscape in this country, both legally, because it opened the door to further erosions on equality norms and autonomy norms, and societally, because we crossed this major threshold in which the government had basically opened the door to banning critical healthcare, abortion, in states across the country. So that is an important timeline here. Tennessee's law, in essence, says the following. You can get hormone therapy if it is consistent with your sex assigned at birth. So if you're a cisgender boy and you're going through puberty late, testosterone, totally fine. You cannot get hormone therapy if it's inconsistent with your sex at birth. And so if you're a transgender boy and you want testosterone to undergo a typical male puberty, you cannot get it. And we made the argument that this was sex discrimination. Every lower court that looked at the evidence blocked these laws, holding that they violated both the Equal Protection Clause because they discriminated based on sex and the Due Process Clause because they infringed on the rights of parents to direct the medical care of their minor children. As we got up in the appeals courts, the court started reversing those lower court decisions and arguing that this wasn't any discrimination, nothing to see here. And what they relied on, and I think this is important, is a very old case that held that pregnancy discrimination is not sex discrimination. And that case was all but forgotten until Justice Alito and Dobbs revitalized it, giving the equal protection arguments in Dobbs the back of the hand. And so that was the argument. The lower courts ruled in favor of the trans plaintiffs. The appeals courts reversed those decisions. And we were at this critical juncture where we had to decide what to do. Going to the Supreme Court is a scary, scary thing in this moment, and everyone can understand. But allowing half the country to ban healthcare for our communities with kids and families suffering and many people not having the resources to go out of state, it felt like a terrible situation. And so we thought, at least we're going to ask the Supreme Court to try to do something less bad than what these lower courts did. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled for Tennessee. The court upheld the Tennessee law, allowing it to remain in effect. It did so narrowly, but it doesn't really matter practically because kids have lost their health care for now 2 years, and those bans are now going to be in effect prospectively. And the court again brings back this 73 case about pregnancy discrimination not being sex discrimination. We have to understand this as part of a broader strategy to erode civil rights protections and continuously either ignore longstanding precedent or chip away at it.
Where do you go from here when it comes to where we're at right now and sort of the immediate work that needs to be done in the face of this ruling?
I'm someone who has always believed that legal work is harm reduction work. We are not going to get transformation in the courts. We're not going to get transformation from a legal system that was designed to uphold chattel slavery, that was designed to maintain genocide of indigenous people in this country. This is not our transformative place. This is the place to minimize the harm of the government and make space for people to do the work of taking care of each other. And so that continues. And queer trans people, we have a long and rich history of creating spaces to care for each other. If you look at ACT UP and how we responded as queer and trans people to the AIDS crisis in this country, that is our legacy, and that work must continue. We also have ongoing work in the legislative advocacy space, but this is challenging work. Congress is not in the business of doing good things if they do anything at all. And so we have to push at the state level, at the local level, and try to make the protections available where we can. We also have to do significant public education work. As we have seen time and again, that when the media corporations and when the various interventions in public discourse are allowed to demonize a group of people, that legitimizes these policy attacks. This is so critical right now because we know the right is spending hundreds of millions of dollars demonizing trans people. And then that demonization is legitimizing executive power grabs by the Trump administration and state level policy officials that want to seize that same type of corrosive power. So we need to change that. And we need to see how we are all becoming prey to very reductive media narratives that make it seem like if we just blame a disenfranchised group of people, that we'll find our way out of the circumstances that we're in. So we all have a role to play in that.
I'm so glad you brought up the media's role in it, because in the documentary that we've alluded to but haven't really spoken about yet, Heightened Scrutiny, it's an important documentary about the case, but it also tells a story in there about how the media's defining of trans life, how the media's defining of trans care really led to laws and court cases and even the public debate about the validity of trans people. Can you share some of the touchstone media moments that led to so much disinformation about trans folks?
Yeah, I mean, so there have been a series of op-eds and longer pieces that are really op-eds but disguised as reported pieces that have the framework, first and foremost, of sort of what is a woman, what is the contested space of womanhood, and how are trans people writ large undermining the safety and security of this idea of womanhood. Now, of course, womanhood is not under attack by trans people in any way, and it's astonishing actually to watch how effective this has been, because you will go to these legislative hearings and the same lawmakers who are banning abortion and trying to eliminate no-fault divorce are then standing up and claiming that they are the champions of women's rights in this one instance of banning trans women from sports and banning healthcare for trans minors. That sort of starts to be legitimized in the public discourse through these media conglomerates that give this sense that womanhood is scarce and that we have to define it narrowly or else it will be gone forever. And this is not a new construction. If you go back to the early 20th century, white women have always tried to define womanhood historically to exclude women of color. That is a central piece of first and second wave feminism at different iterations. And so that piece of it then becomes sort of metabolized in the culture through these pieces. And then I think the most insidious way this happens with respect to trans people is this outsized focus on very small aspects of our lives that are largely not understood. So you have 900 people about in the United States, a huge country, receiving puberty blockers. years to treat gender dysphoria. And yet you have tens of thousands of words calling into question the legitimacy of this care, which leads people to believe that there are thousands of trans kids getting access to this care in their communities and that there's some conspiracy changing the contours of childhood. And that, of course, is not happening. What is happening is there are young people who are suffering, whose parents are doing research, who are trying to get in to see a specialist, but they live in the United States. And if we used our critical thinking skills, we would understand that they would never get in to see the specialist because that's what happens in the United States. And then years later, they get access to a medical care that everyone agrees is essential for their well-being. And then you have the government coming in, citing the New York Times, citing the Washington Post, and then saying, well, this is very untested care. We should be very concerned about this. And that starts to create the sense that there is a quote unquote protecting children paradigm that is guiding this in the same way we see in the abortion context. We are saving babies. We are protecting children. And then it becomes this genuinely like concern trolling because they don't really know and they're not in these homes and they're not working with these families. But the general public all of a sudden is like, there is something to be concerned about. I know there is because I've read tens of thousands of words on it, even though it affects 900 people in the United States. And so that is sort of how we see this happening. And it's astonishing because you can see the connection where you have Justice Thomas citing the New York Times, I think 10 times in his concurrence in United States versus Grimedi. And all of a sudden, the justices care tons about the European healthcare system and European law when, mind you, we do not look to either European law or health systems ever in this country.
I would love a European health system in this country. Yeah. Please bring it on.
Bring it on. And so there, all of a sudden, they have all this reporting about how the European countries are calling this care into question, which is a whole separate and complex discussion that is being imported into the conversation here, even though we never follow the European model for literally anything. And so you can see this sort of selective fixation and then the selective drawing from different things to legitimize attacks on care.
You know, there's always been smatterings of like troll shit, news play. Nobody paid attention to what, Newsmax would say or whatever. But all of a sudden, when the Washington Post or the New York Times writes some shit hot take and you click on the research link and it's some weird woman, 3 times the same person, and it's her website and a blog and maybe her Instacart order. And you're just like, what the fuck is this, right? And it's the same with like the mifepristone case that we just had, where they were just 3 different research papers they were relying on debunked. And then I was thinking about the New York Times and Dick Cheney in the Iraq War, when it was like the New York Times said, we have identified through their sources that there's weapons of mass destruction. And Dick Cheney was the source. And then Dick Cheney goes on Meet the Press and says, the New York Times has sources. And like, bitch, you're the source, right? And so it's this pattern of delegitimized bunk bullshit that appears in legitimate media, and then that will guide all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yes. And now we're having the same entities be like, well, you should never have advocated for this care because it's not legitimate. And I was like, but you were the one who decided it wasn't legitimate. And the only way you can tell a community not to advocate for their own rights and survival is if you've made people believe that they're not harmed by their oppression. And that is unfortunately what we're up against right now.
Something we talk about a lot at Abortion Access Front is managing oppression on multiple fronts, right? Many of us are confronting the oppressors and also bringing comfort to those most affected while also being affected. And you, as a trans man, are also in that camp with the added responsibility of being the legal defender as well. How do you, as a person, Chase, navigate the personal weight you feel as a trans man living under these assaults while trying to have the clarity and strength to be the defender for so many?
I think for me, as is always the case, it's such a community effort. And I love being queer. I love being trans. I will say that every day. And so as much as I hate that my communities are under attack, I will never stop fighting. And I'm not demoralized because I get to go back into this body, into these communities and say, we will take care of each other. We will fight for the government to do what it should do. We will fight for people to be our allies and accomplices. But queer and trans people have been leading movements throughout history. in part because we have been discarded and rejected. And that has allowed us, in that discarding and rejecting, to imagine more complex and beautiful and nuanced worlds. And that is what we will continue to do. And so I am deeply moved every day by the history of by trans elders, by the people who are moving in this fight alongside me, and by the young people who are showing us that there is a brighter future ahead. And so, I'll take the hits. There are hits, and we just keep fighting, because what else can we do?
You were saying in the documentary, a lot of your colleagues, it's their dream to fight at SCOTUS and to argue before SCOTUS. And you said it really wasn't yours. It was kind of one of your worst nightmares. What you did say, what I loved, was that you thought it was really important to have a strong trans sensibility guiding these cases. And I think that really spoke to me. And in the context of the documentary, there was so many incredible, diverse voices of trans folks from all different backgrounds of work, all different ethnicities, and they were bringing what so many people don't see, which is this richness of who trans people are. And I think the thing that I loved the most about the documentary was every moment of it countered every piece of bullshit that they get to say when trans visibility isn't happening.
Yeah, I feel it so deeply. I love seeing also the diversity of ages and this idea that we just appeared yesterday, but you can go back in this film and other films and see us throughout history. And there's 80-year-olds out advocating, and there's 8-year-olds out advocating. And that, to me, is so beautiful. And we want to be a refutation of the idea that we aren't here, and that we don't have joy, and that we aren't powerful.
And I think, too, they're very invested in pushing forward this false narrative that trans people showed up like 20 minutes ago. We've been living amongst the trans community forever. It's kind of the same way with so many fear-mongering policies, where it's like, if this happens, then terrible things are going to happen. And it's like, people have been around forever and it hasn't started yet. At what point are we going to be like, oh, it's never happening?
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially if you look that they're trying to erase our history, ban books about us, ban discussion of us, and then they're going to say in 50 years, well, they never existed. And to the extent that narrative takes hold, it's because that history has been erased. The Nazis burned the books about trans people. And will this administration bar the teaching of our histories? We're going to try to stop them so that this story of we just appeared yesterday can't keep being told.
So, Chase, we have to go, and I feel like I could talk to you for 80 more minutes, but I want to end with asking this one question. What are some ways that cis folks can not only fight with true solidarity with trans folks, but be a part in making space for trans joy?
Let's truly live politics of solidarity. Let's make space for each other and disrupt this idea that somehow our liberation is at odds. That has to happen in all these micro and macro ways that we can all control starting tomorrow. The beloved Andrea Gibson just passed away, and I would say go read Andrea's poetry, watch Enigma on HBO, and watch trans history from the last century, from this past 100 years, and just see that we're just contending with our humanity and our sense of possibility as you are. And so I'm hoping that we can keep centering that.
That is really great words of wisdom. Chase, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're so busy, but you were just somebody that we have wanted to reach out to. And the second the case was announced, we were like, let's not reach out to Chase now. Let's wait. Thank you so much for just being a light and being a joy.
Thank you for having me and being in this conversation.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Chase. If you would like to support and do exactly what we asked, you can support trans-led organizations, stay engaged with your political representatives, and follow ACLU for updates about their legal cases, including upcoming cases at SCOTUS.
You can follow the ACLU at ACLU_nationwide, and you can follow Chase at Chase Strangio on Instagram or Blue Sky.
And as always, these stories will be in our show notes, and you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot at the bottom right will walk anyone anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion.
We do the show because this information is not given enough attention in the media. So help us spread the word and show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Every little bit helps us reach more listeners and do more of this important work.
You know, shit isn't getting any easier, but I think we can freshen the vibe up a little bit with our next guest.
Oh, I know we can. You may know her as the first openly trans woman on RuPaul's Drag Race. You might have seen her on both seasons of Netflix Survival of the Thickest, or you might be cheering as she serves as the ACLU's first artist ambassador for trans justice. She's a TV and Broadway actress and recording artist. Please welcome Peppermint.
Peppermint!
Hi.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
You know, it's so fun to see you again in person because the last time we chatted, you did one of our Do Re Mi Tu sexist song shows. It was during COVID.
I remember.
We were talking about the song you did, and it was Talk Dirty, that horrible Jason Derulo song.
The Jason Derulo song. Yeah.
Jason
And I was like,
Derulo.
yeah, I was like, I'll like flip it a little bit and try to, like we did a little like monologue or like set it up a little bit, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've not even sung or listened to that song since that day.
You know, that song literally could be a court case.
And then what ended up happening? A bunch of court cases every year of a bunch of different public figures after that moment.
I know, it was so wild. And of course, you know, what I love about doing that show is it just shows the rampant sexism, rampant transphobia. There's no daylight on a Venn diagram of those things. They're just all the same people all together. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit before we get into the meat of the bigger interview, like how pop culture plays such a role in perpetuating so much junk.
You know, I'm still trying to figure it out, like wrap my head around it, the full idea, but I can say that my opinions about pop culture and perpetuating harmful or helpful ideas, and to what degree. Obviously, like I think my first thought would be my first takeaway and my hope that the final judgment of all this ultimately would be that if we had to put it into a binary of is like art good or bad, that art, although it is subjective, it does help. It teaches people, it helps them open their mind and learn about different types of things and like that. But then the question is, what is art and what is corporate slop?
I 100% agree with you. I think there's way too much content, and sometimes the content scratches the itch that should be your activist as opposed to you actually being an activist. But I also think with like this decentralizing in some media, and obviously things are more corporate than ever, but like in places like TikTok, there's a little bit of decentralizing. We also get to see stories that like we wouldn't, that like would never have made it onto the MGM soundstage, right? Because someone with a phone goes into the park with their phone and then puts it on TikTok. Like I do think there's a little bit of that. And I think of like your work and like your output, right? Like there's this world we live in, there's this industry that you work in that tries really hard to harm women and to harm trans people, but you manage in your work to still like find strength and like fight these obstacles and still lead with joy, right? You were a blushing trans bride just recently in a show, like all of these moments that like, again, in the golden age of Hollywood, we would have never seen, right? A Black trans
You're
woman
right.
as a Black trans woman bride. Never. Like, how do you find the strength to like have both realities exist in your head and in your life and in your actions at the same time?
I don't even know, because I mean, I did make the decision a while ago, a few years ago, that like all of the art or content or or both, sometimes it's literally both, that I put out or that I create or that I try to be involved in also allows me to use my platform to speak to the issues that I think are important at the time or important for me in the community. And so, that really kind of manifests itself in me wanting to play like an accurate portrayal of a Black trans woman in a film or television thing that I'm doing. Or if I'm doing music, I used to write about high heels and like glitter and lashes, which is fun. A world without that would be an unhappy world. But I made a decision to write about the experience of being like a queer Black woman who's trying to find love or whatever the things are happening. I wanted to bring those like real issues and touch on them and sort of explain them a little bit without being so preachy in my music, as opposed to just like, look, I can sashay. Like it needed to be so much more than that, especially post 2020. So I did make that decision, and I think I'm really blessed to have had some opportunities where people are like, oh, well, let's work with Peppermint or let's put her on the show, whatever. And they've been open to having sort of that truth or that authenticity come through their projects, the TV show or the thing that they're doing. Because, honey, Netflix is the last place that I thought would have a wedding of a Black trans woman, especially given how things had gone a few years prior, like even during the pandemic. I
Yeah.
mean, I was one of those people that was out, like one year I was protesting Dave Chappelle. And then I was out picketing because during the strike, like in front of Netflix. And so I was like, they'll never hire me. And then literally the next year, I was on a TV show with them. And I do think that you're right. Like the TikToks and the social media aspect and the fact that so much of this content is in our own hands and we can create our own stuff means that they eventually at some point did and would have to take notice of that. And I do think that the voices that have come through and the creativity and the stories that have come through have sort of forced the hand of some of these mainstream, platforms and companies and labels and also television studios to kind of, not acquiesce, but like be like, okay, we better put some of this on there because that's where all the kids are. And so it sucks that it's just for their like, we've learned, especially in 2023 with the whole Bud Light and Target debacle, they're not married to anything. They have no spirit or no soul. Like they don't care what's good. They don't care about us at all. They'll put us up there and they'll even say the words. And then the next month they'll say, we hate them, like
The minute the winds change, they change with the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also feel too, you can tell when people are committed to representation versus filling this quota that I think, because, and this is what I think, especially just watching you, they've allowed you to be quiet in roles and multidimensional in roles. It's not like we want you to fill this stereotype that we think the public will consume. You are all over the place. And that shows that they cared about portraying your humanity. And I think that's the shit that makes me feel really hopeful when it's like that.
Same here. I pinch myself every day. I'm really happy that that I've had the experience to be on a show. I mean, of course, I've always wanted to have like an accurate portrayal or something that like really spoke to the issues. But the one time that I was like nearly floored at a scene that I did, I was also had a part on Harlem, and I played the cousin of Jerry Johnson, who now is on Survival of the Thickest. I played her cousin, and so we had this scene where our grandmother had died, and we were sitting down going through the belongings and the inheritance, things like that. And we broke into this conversation about, oh, do you think grandma was like, was she queer or was she like super? She was definitely queer friendly because she knew about both of us. Ty is the character that she plays, is a lesbian on the show. And so like, we're both queer. We're both related. Is that like something that is passed on? Is that like, did we inherit this because we think grandma was queer? So that was the beginning of the conversation. And then it turned to like, are you going to have kids or like, and she's like, no, I don't know. Are you going to have kids? I'm thinking about it. And the fact that two Black queer women, one trans, having this conversation about like bodily autonomy and having children and like passing on the queerness essence
yeah
through the generations was one of the most beautiful ideas that I'd ever seen. And I've not seen a scene like that in a mainstream platform like Amazon Prime. So to your point, it's rare. It's more rare that they get it right. They meaning just like the people who opt to have a minority, a person who's disabled or a person who's this or that on there. It feels sometimes like it's a little bit more of a checkbox for the most part, but when they do it right, it really hits. It really hits.
I think it does. It's also nice to like, I don't identify as queer, but it's just nice to see ourselves. I'm a Black woman, and it's just nice to see ourselves anywhere. I watched your acceptance speech at the Trans Vanguard Award from Reach LA. It's the top of your socials, right? And I was blown away. Like you touched on everything from thanking doctors who provide trans care to pointing out the hypocrisy of restricting that care. And then you linked it to the fight for all of our rights, right? Have you always been so political and outspoken, or is this just a new development because the world's in a dumpster fire?
I mean, the world is definitely in a dumpster fire, and everybody is looking for a glass of water. I'll put vinegar on whatever.
It'll help.
I'll put it out with a glass of piss, whatever. I mean, I'm telling you, like, don't burn pee. I know that sounds the strangest thing, but like, I would worked in a nightclub once. It was a really dark nightclub, and you know, like lights and sounds and smoke machines and all that. And we were behind the DJ booth, which is where they keep all the storage for a bunch of stuff too. And we were out of smoke. And honey, I'm a drag entertainer. I need smoke and all lights. I need the whole show. And so I found the jug of this fog juice. It was always in this white jug. There's next to the fog machine. So I poured it in and turned it on. It was not fog juice. The fog came. It turned into fog. The room's filled up with fog. It was the most rancid smell I'd ever smelled.
Not the lesson I expected today.
Some drunk mother sucker had peed into the fog container juice, and I poured it in to fill up the machine, and the machine sprayed fog pee onto everybody. And it was, everyone was just like, "Ugh." It was terrible. Anyways.
And that is the greatest story ever. Oh my God. You know what? No one else has that story, Peppermint. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, okay, Peppermint, talk about your experience as a Black trans woman. Okay. But first let me tell you about this pee fog story.
But the dumpster fire, you know, I would just say no, because I become sort of awakened, especially, I mean, I've always been like, yes and no. Since I've learned so much in the past few years, watching these conversations that have come to light, and more people are having a lot of these sort of nuanced conversations about the different issues that impact us and social issues and things like that. And I've been learning so much, like my mind is like quadrupled in the amount of way that I'm able to make certain connections. But I have always cared about these things. And I would say my first thought would be like, no, that's just something when I like came into my queerness, but that was really a very long time ago. And I talked to my mom. She told me a story about like once, and I forgot that this happened, but I was in second grade, I think. And I was experiencing, me and some of the other Black students in the room were experiencing some racism
As one
from the
does.
class and as one does, from the teacher, who more like we would call it prejudice back then, where the teacher was just like, you know, giving preferential treatment to the white kids. And so I somehow in a day or two rallied all the students, every single student in that classroom, I wrote out a petition to the teacher that, you know, you are being unfair to the Black students. And I got all the students to sign the petition. This is the part that is telling. My mom tells me that I got all the Black students to sign at the bottom and all the white students to sign at the top on the way down. And they handed it to the teacher. And the fact that I understood that dynamic.
Because racists they only understand each other. Yeah, they don't hear you.
Yeah. And I was like, I can't believe I was like 8 years old or something and doing that. And so I guess the answer is yes.
You're a strategist at 8.
We just spoke with your friend Chase Strangio about Heightened Scrutiny, the documentary that you also appeared in. There was this beautiful scene with you at the Supreme Court when Chase is coming out of the court after he's just argued. I cried watching that. Can you walk us through that moment, and can you tell us what you were feeling?
It was a long day, really early in the morning, and it was cold as bejesus out there. And so that was the first thing that I was kind of like, oh my gosh. It was really heartening to see so many people from the community rallying and there. I was hosting the entire event, so I was a little like, you know, of course I was focused on that mostly and wanting to make sure that everything ran smoothly. But there were moments of like, I was discouraged a few times, not so much of what was going on inside of the courtroom, but what was happening across the way from us, because you can't really tell that much in the film. But like, I guess, you know, it's equal opportunity. You know, we all have access to the place to protest. And so they actually cordon off areas for you to protest, and they cordon off more than one if there's like opposing groups. And so like there was our side and then the anti-trans side, like literally right next to us, like not even 15 feet. They didn't even like, they weren't like, they were like literally
Side by
half
side,
y'all be
shoulder to
standing
shoulder.
to shoulder. And I was like, oh my gosh, they basically just put two, like not even a chalk line. And so I was next to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I was next to Matt Walsh.
Where was that pee machine? Where was that
Hello. The truth, honey. And so that was really discouraging to know that they were saying these anti-trans things. I wasn't able to hear what they were saying, even though I was so close to them, because they had the worst taste in music. When I tell you the worst, they don't have any, like, even a closeted gay that could be like, yo, this is not the song. Each side had like a PA system and a DJ to play music in between the speakers and things. And they were like blasting. It was like the worst mix of music. It was so bad. I was like, it exemplified exactly who they were. But once Chase came out, once the case was over and they'd finished arguing, the historic nature of the moment really struck me, that I was watching the first ever trans man to argue in front of trans rights in front of the Supreme Court, in front of all of these people that showed up. It was very Jesus Jones, the band Jesus Jones, Right Here, Right Now is the song. And like, like I just felt so grateful to be alive in this moment and like witness this moment. And when we were talking about the film, Heightened Scrutiny, and the creation of the film, and we were listening to Chase sort of go through his reason, and I don't know if he says this in the actual film, his reasons for even wanting to do a documentary like this. Apparently, initially his answer was no. But when Sam Feder, the director, asked him about it, he said, we need to have a record that we tried, that we fought, and that we tried. And that like got me so emotional. And so I was there for that kind of a moment, and we are friends. And so I love Chase very much. And so I was equal parts proud as a friend, and then also grateful that there's someone who knows how we feel, who's qualified, overqualified, to go in front of even the Supreme Court and argue on behalf of even the most basic rights that we should have. And so, yeah, that's how I felt. So I was also emotional.
We love that you also have this book club. And one of the things that we just know to be true is, and especially from the documentary and just sort of like life in general, is that, most Americans aren't lucky enough to have amazing trans people in their lives. So what they learn about trans people is from shitty articles, terrible broadcasters, yada, yada. So for a person who does not have a strong queer community in their lives, and you were to say, I'm going to recommend a book for you to kick off a little bit so you can learn about our humanity and to get you excited about going out there and introducing trans folks into your world, is there one book you would give somebody to start with?
Yes. But I got to preface it by saying that most of the choices that I've made so far in literature and queer literature are for the queer community to reacclimate everyone with our own history, which can easily get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first book that I would recommend would not be like, let me teach you what a trans person is. It's not that.
Right.
I would say is called A Transgender History by Susan Stryker, because I know that there's this notion for people who are not even queer that trans people are like some new invention as of 2 years ago. This book talks about the history of trans people politically and socially from the perspective, obviously, of a trans person, not just like from, academic perspective. And you can start to see the patterns of how it's the same thing, same shit, different day. And so that's a great book. I would also recommend, this has nothing to do with queerness necessarily, but like understanding the hierarchies of people and how there's always a group that gets put upon and discriminated against, and how they're always treated. And it's throughout history, that's how it happens, especially Western culture is, it's off the 2020 playlist, Cast, The Origin of Our Discontents by Isabella Wilkerson. So that's not a queer book. That's not on our queer book list, but like I think it'll open up people's minds and to understand like whoever's being discriminated against, it's almost interchangeable. You can kind of see how they're treated in the same way. And then the last one I would probably say that we did read that I thought was beautiful, So Many Stars by Caro de Robertis. So good. And then the last one, which is a very personal account and a memoir, is Another Word for Love by Carvel Wallace. That's a lot of books, but it is so rewarding. AI is going to be like copying us soon. And like even the stuff that we think is emotional and real it'll be copied. It won't even be real. And so this right now is a great way to reconnect with communities of people that we got disconnected from in the digital age.
Peppermint, I love that we are all afraid of AI in the same way. And I also really, really love your book list. I love reading. It's my favorite thing to do. Can you tell us what's your next big fun thing? We alluded to this documentary that is coming.
Yeah, I'm excited about the release of the documentary called A Deeper Love. It's a documentary that follows my life for the past 10 years, before Drag Race, during Drag Race, after Drag Race, and beyond. The trials and tribulations, the ups and downs. It's a little more exposing than I would have normally wanted, but I'm like, hey, let's do it. I'm only gonna do it once, so here it
You
is.
say that now. Well, when you come back in 10 years and you're doing your third documentary, I'm going to remind you of this moment.
I want Peppermint 2 Electric Boogaloo. I want that.
Oh my gosh. I just watched that like a month ago. And yes. Anyway, the documentary we premiered in San Francisco, and now we're looking for a new home, hopefully New Fest in the fall in New York in 2025. And then also, it was recently announced that I was cast in an all trans and non-binary production of The Drowsy Chaperone.
Fun.
And we're performing it at Carnegie Hall. And so I think there might be an historic element to that. But either way, it's certainly not like typical thing to see. And that's produced by Breaking the Binary. So I'm excited about those two things and season 3 of Survival of the Thickest, which will also be filming that same month. Honey, I'm going to have a busy October. So don't ask me to go to any haunted houses.
I'm exhausted for you already, Peppermint. Can you tell our listeners where to find you?
Peppermint 247 on all socials.
Thank you so much. It was so incredible having you here talking to us. I love this. So good. Thank
so
you.
good.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
So much fun. Thank you so much. And when you're not visiting her on social, please, you can find out all things Peppermint at peppermintonline.com. That was a big show. No 6 degrees, no fake commercial. We're just doing it, Moji. We had a lot of packed in, and now we're going to say goodbye because we have shit to do.
We do. But before we say goodbye, we want to tell people thanks for listening. And we want to thank Chase again for being on our show and bringing his brilliance. And be sure to support trans-led organizations and follow the ACLU for updates about legal cases and anything happening at SCOTUS that we have to fight like hell.
That's right. Did we make you smarter today? Make you laugh a little bit? Show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, you can stay connected with us on social media at Abortion Front across all platforms. With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access.
And this is your reminder. Operation Save Abortion at Netroots Nation on Saturday, August 9th. It's 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Central Time, and links to get your tickets will be in our show notes. Also, you can browse other awesome OpSafe trainings at operationsaveabortion.com. You can get an abortion activist glow up and learn about all the areas abortion providers and patients need your help. We have a super cool activist calendar, and you can check it out to find local and national actions and educational opportunities, operationsaveabortion.com.
Also, we have a great mutual aid program at Abortion Access Fund called Adopt a Clinic, where the public can support independent clinics, abortion funds, clinic escort groups, and patients directly by ordering needed items from any of those organizations' wish lists.
This week, we are highlighting the Palmetto State Abortion Fund. This South Carolina-based organization helps fund reproductive health care for Southerners in South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. They're looking for everything from snacks to heating pads to menstrual pads. Links are in our show notes, so go and show them some love. And if you want to get involved more specifically with AAF, we need you. Sign up to volunteer at our website, aafront.org, and let's figure it out together.
That's right. And we're going to take a couple weeks off because we are preparing for this big OpSafe event. You know, we've been blabbing about it, I know, but it's so important. And there's very few organizations that really help you make that heart-to-heart connection. And we are one of them. And we really want to train you up, train you and your besties so that you can literally not feel like, I don't know what to do. We'll be able to do something, and you're going to make somebody's life better by doing it.
And it feels 100% better to have something to do, to have action items, to have marching orders. And this is your invitation to get some.
That's right. And we're taping it while we're at Netroots. And then the episode will actually be dropping on August 15th. And it's really fun because it's a video episode. But if you're just listening to part of the podcast, you can go to the workshop portion on video. It's a whole just cornucopia of good things.
And we love the work that we do. Another way you can support us is join our Patreon.
Give us money.
Yes, you'll support great content, get cool FBK merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. That includes OpSave. You can pledge at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills. FBK is edited by Remy DeTournay and is produced by Jen Moon for Abortion Access Front.
And finally, we leave you with right-wing, mouth-breathing podcast Seth Gruber, a man who shows us his whole ass while letting us know he thinks everyone on our podcast is unfuckable.
One of the reasons, actually, that we know abortion is demonic and satanic is that so many of the feminists or feminazis, to quote Rush Limbaugh, we're going to get in trouble for this one. Some of abortion's most energetic and loud cheerleaders are ugly and fat. You've thought it. Don't you judge me right now. You've noticed it and you've thought it before, haven't you?
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.